Appreciate that. Well, thank you. I'm very excited to get to be with you all today, and appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about Austin and a little bit about what we're doing. And I didn't realize until this morning, of course, that our water apparently makes you taller, and I need to be drinking more water. So I'm gonna do that. Now, I'm very excited to get to be here. And let me just start off with the premise of why I'm here. And that is, for those that don't know, I was mayor of Austin, Texas one time before. I was mayor of Austin from 1997 to 2001, and then I was elected to this term in 2022. So it feels a lot like how second grade felt when I got to do it a second time too. So, but what's important about why I say that and why I lead with that is because when I was mayor the first time, Austin was becoming a big international or global city. Today, Austin is a big international and global city, and there's been a real transition, if you will. And I want to talk a little bit about transitions to kind of set up my thesis about why Austin is Austin and why what you're doing is so important. First of all, I think that the world has gone through two big transitions, probably in my lifetime. And that is, the first transition is a transition about what is an economic asset. What makes a play, what is the economic asset that we all want? And of course, you can go way back, and the asset was land, right? Then with the land had the money. But that shifted in the last century to industrial assets. And while we still compete a little bit to try to get industrial assets to locate in certain places, last century it was more about the Industrial Revolution and people coming off the farms and ranches and going in, into getting into the textile mills and other manufacturing. But that shifted too. And the asset was no longer land, or it still was partly land, it's still partly industrial assets, but the major asset became the mind. It became creativity, it became innovation, imagination. In other words, it became people, right? People with creativity, educated workers, imagination, that sort of thing. The second big transition that occurred relatively simultaneously is, what was the area, what was the place, if you will, that was going to be an economic engine, an economic powerhouse, have economic power or economic wealth. And of course, in the old days, it was empires, right? I guess you go far enough back, empires. Then in the last century, nation states that were superpowers. But we even saw the failing of nation states that were superpowers. What happened with technology was it became regions. And we're still in that transition to some degree. But regions could hold economic, places that never before could have been economic powerhouses get to be economic powerhouses. You no longer need a port in order to be an economic powerhouse. You can be a portal. You no longer need access to land and capital and labor all in one place, because you can access labor, capital, and markets anywhere in the world, any time of day, really, with one of these, right? So those two big transitions, when they converged, where people, the people were the asset, and people could go anywhere they want to go to be part of an economic power, well, Austin emerged during that period of time as a focal point in the global economy. The world changed, and when the greatest asset became creativity, imagination, and intellect, the asset became people. People could go where they want. Innovation became the key part. And Austin, Texas was sitting here just kind of humming, right? In part because it was no coincidence that we were trying to create an economy based upon intellectual capital, and we were surrounded by great institutions of higher learning, everywhere from Waco to San Antonio, and of course with the University of Texas at Austin sitting right here. And if you force me to, I'll go 70 miles to to the east and mention Texas A&M as well. But the truth of the matter is we were surrounded by that. And so we became this place that could be a global wealth creator and powerhouse. I'll mention one other thing about that. One of the key parts of Austin becoming that sort of global enterprise was that the number one, and people that are from Austin will know what I'm talking about here, the number one T-shirt and bumper sticker in Austin, Texas for decades has not been what it ought to be. Kirk Watson for Austin mayor. No, the number one bumper sticker in Austin, Texas has been Keep Austin Weird. Keep Austin Weird. Now, a lot of people think that's kind of weird when they hear it the first time. But that's part of from my perspective, that's always been how I've seen that bumper sticker and that T-shirt. Keep it weird. What does that mean? Well, to me, what that's always meant is keep it open for new ideas, for new people, for new thinking, for new culture. Because let's face it, many times when you hear that first idea, you go, well, that's weird. That's not going to amount to anything. What a weird thought. I mean, if I called my daddy my sophomore year in college and said, Daddy, I've got this great idea. I'm going to drop out of school and I'm going to build computers and I'm going to sell them directly to people. He'd have said, that's a weird idea, son. Don't touch that. If I'd have called him 2 weeks later and said, I got a different idea. I'm going to open me a grocery store and I'm going to sell bean sprouts and granola bars. He'd have said, well, that's a weirder idea. And of course, that's Michael Dell and John Mackey of Whole Foods. And we all know of this town is filled with the weird idea that resulted in somebody becoming a billionaire, right? Well, Austin has always been open to keeping it weird and keeping it open and keeping a mind ready for change. And of course, I mean, the pandemic kind of proved up all of my theory, right? People wanted to be here. When they had a chance to move here, they came. So Austin's ability to nurture an incredibly diverse and dynamic innovation ecosystem is a function, in my mind, of being a complete city, a city that is a place that lures all kinds of folks with all kinds of weird and new ideas, people that are vibrant, vital, and looking to the future. They bring their new thoughts, they bring their new ideas, they bring their new music, their new culture, their greater diversity. And in Austin, we've always been able to discover, let people discover who they want to be, embrace who they are, and just be themselves. And that openness to change has been what has defined us in this town. That openness to embracing the new and the different, whatever someone comes up with, has defined us. Being a place that is open has been what has defined us. It's a feature and not a bug. The U.S. Army gets it. In July 2018, the United States Army made a huge splash when it announced that Austin, Texas, would become the headquarters of the Army Futures Command. And now to the casual observer, the Army in Austin didn't seem like a natural fit. I mean, you know, that Keep Austin Weird thing, you know. But the sweeping modernization, that effort that the Army Futures Command wanted to do, that required proximity to a talented workforce, a top-tier academic program in science and engineering, private sector innovation, and a good quality of life. Army Undersecretary Ryan McCarthy said at the time, "We do not have time to build this ecosystem. It needed to be ready immediately." Well, those words came back to me a couple of weeks ago when we announced a major new investment in Austin's life sciences industry, a company called Billion to One. Billion to One is a cutting-edge leader in precision diagnostics, and it's expanding its operations in Austin, Texas. It's going to have a state-of-the-art lab and office facilities and put their headquarters here. At full build-out, the company is expected to produce more than 1,000 jobs that range from logistics specialists to technicians to postdoc researchers. That is 1,000 new jobs created in Austin without tax incentives or any public giveaways. And what brought Billion to One to Austin is that in 2011, as part of a program that I put into place when I was in the Texas State Senate, of having 10 goals in 10 years related to healthcare and our economy, we laid out plans to grow out our life sciences industry by creating an environment, again, an ecosystem that nurtures innovation and innovative thinkers. Billion to One is coming to Austin in part because of that ecosystem, because we as a community came together to invest in the very fundamental building blocks needed to support the life sciences industry, including, again, having a medical school at that little Tier 1 research university that also happens to be number 1 in the country right now, the University. I like the way I like your style. At the University of Texas. Now, many of you ought to be thinking right now, well, what's in the life sciences ecosystem is different than the tech and engineering ecosystem. Well, I guess it is. It's a little different. But the ecosystem that drew the Army Futures Command and the ecosystem that is causing and is drawing like Billion to One here is an innovation ecosystem. And the Venn diagrams, if you will, of these different, quote, ecosystems all converge when it comes to innovation. And there's a lot of opportunity in this community for innovative thinkers to come together and you know, who knows what they're going to come up with. For me, that's the exciting part of this. So now let me talk a little bit about AI and what we're doing at the City of Austin. And I'm not going to stand up here and tell you I can even spell AI. But I'm learning more all the time and the role that we ought to play. The City of Austin actually created, I hope y'all can see whatever that is that's flying in front of my face, and it's not just me having a stroke. So anyway, the City of Austin created an innovation office in 2014, and the aim of that innovation office was to explore new approaches to the very complex problems that we face in Austin. A decade later, that office is now the tip of the spear for one of the most complex and consequential issues of today, and that is how the City of Austin is going to engage with artificial intelligence on both a practical and a policy level. A council colleague, I'll say, recently called for eliminating the innovation office as part of the budget process on the newly adopted budget that we just passed a couple of weeks ago. And that person said we ought to eliminate the innovation office because, quote, innovation comes from the private sector, not from the government. So I want to set aside, as part of this discussion, the encyclopedic list of innovations that originated in government labs, at public universities, and things like that. But that statement simply ignores that we as a city have to be a voice on behalf of our constituents in the broader AI conversation. It's interesting. I'll just tell you, I'm making a lot of phone calls these days because I'm running for re-election. So I'm calling people asking for money. Don't worry, this is not a plea for that. But if you want to talk, well, I'll talk to you. But anyway, no, but I'm calling a lot of, yeah, bless your heart, bless your heart. We'll pass the hat at the end. I was raised in the Church of Christ. I know how to do that. But when I was making these phone calls, a guy answers the phone, and I said, "Hey, good afternoon, it's Kirk Watson." And he started asking, he said, "Oh, really?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, and he asked me like 2 questions, clearly trying to determine whether or not I was a robot or something, right? And I said, no, if you think I'm a robot, no, this really is Kirk. And he said, "Wow, I thought this was some artificial intelligence sort of thing." And I said, I'm very flattered because that's the first time somebody has used my name and intelligence in the same sentence in so long. Yeah, artificial or otherwise, I'm happy to have it happen to me. But anyway, the point is I'm learning a lot. I just screwed up this computer somehow. Y'all can deal with that later. Now, from the city standpoint, dealing with AI, security and privacy become our paramount issues, right? That's first and foremost. Because, and I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but few modern technologies have as broad an impact or as much potential as these AI tools, but we're starting from the premise that we also understand that this means that they have the potential to create significant risks across the organization and for our residents if we screw it up and if they're implemented poorly. And we certainly recognize the enormous potential for AI tools. We want them. We want them. Unlike trying to abolish the innovation office, we want them to create efficiencies. We want them to be able to enhance collaboration. We want to improve services. We want to drive innovation in a lot of different areas. But we also recognize that these tools can create significant security, privacy, and ethical risk, and we're focused really on the front end of trying to mitigate these as we develop and deploy AI-based solutions. The truth of the matter is, government is not allowed much slack. Government's not allowed to be as weird as those ideas might be in the private sector. If government fouls it up, then it was supposed to be perfect from the start. And we recognize that. I recognize that. So all of our work in this space has to be guided by the principle, first, of doing no harm. We start with the principle of doing no harm. And then we got to be diligent about looking for hidden vulnerabilities, unintended consequence for users, and those that could be affected by whatever inputs we have. So the city's been working on a select AI pilot and research projects for some time now, and we've been doing it in collaboration, again, with that little research university we have up the street as partners with things such as the University of Texas Good Systems Initiative. It's important to note that all of the programs, you know what I'm talking about, I like that, and all of the programs right now are in pilot and study phase, and they're showing promising results, but none, and I want to be clear, none of them have yet replaced current systems. All of them have human oversight and can inform, but they don't make decisions, and none of them are public facing at this point. Again, there's probably a conservative nature to this. One, do no harm. Two, look for the hidden vulnerabilities and make sure you're looking under every rock to show you how far back I'll go on that. We'll talk about rocks as opposed to AI. And three, look for the unintended consequences. But let me give you a couple of examples. One is ambulance routing. One of the pilots focuses on where to deploy ambulances. And the collaboration between UT and our emergency medical services started in 2021, and it's using an AI algorithm to determine the best strategy for staging and routing ambulances based on different variables and scenarios. Again, we're not letting AI make the decisions, but we're finding that there are instances where you can get ambulances where you need them to be faster. And so in the non-AI world, what we're doing is we're actually putting some of those things to use. We're not letting AI make those decisions, but we're actually seeing that we're getting better results by doing that. Here's one that I thought was very interesting, because you talk about the basics of something that AI can help. Hand tools, smart hand tools. One of the studies, which was just started last year, is exploring the potential for developing smart hand tools. And they might be very useful to City of Austin workers. These tools, welders, chainsaws, concrete drills, precision power tools, they leverage AI with embedded sensing and the Internet of Things to make hand tools safer and more efficient. The smart tools are have the potential to streamline our training process, and one goal of the project is to enable more equitable access to jobs by minimizing the amount of training that's needed and promoting usability across workers with a wide range of abilities. Again, a hand tool, what a weird idea to be able to make it where we have more equitable results. Another is real-time fire tracking and smoke analysis. As part of that, the city is using a digital twin system that combines real-time data on fires, buildings, and weather to predict smoke dispersion and issue early warnings, which is, of course, particularly crucial in Austin's very complex wildland urban environment. By predicting the path of smoke dispersion across both urban and wildland areas, firefighters can make more informed decisions about evacuation routes and resource allocation. And city officials can also issue more targeted warnings to residents in areas that are likely to be affected, potentially saving lives and minimizing property damage that we could have. And that collaboration between UT and Austin began in 2020, and it's ongoing. The city is currently using that tool. We are collecting data from the physical world. We run simulations on the digital twin, and we use the simulation results to optimize operations and advise what can be changed accordingly in the physical world. So those are just a couple of examples. And as I said, the city of Austin is committed to leveraging these tools. We want to do it responsibly and effectively, and we want to ensure security, all of the things that I've talked about. But we want to create efficiencies, and we want to create effectiveness. Our Chief Innovation Officer is a guy named Daniel Collada, and he recently testified up at the state capitol to a Texas Legislative Committee about the city's policies, our use, and our outlook for AI tools. They're looking at it up at the state capitol about how government ought to work and how we ought to be doing this. And he emphasized to the committee that we need to have internal governance structures. And that's going to be a key part of how the city of Austin address this, because we're going to have the necessary oversight and guidance as we set the stage for all of these different things. And to that end, I'll mention that the city manager last year created an internal AI working group to develop guidelines from our professional staff on how we do use AI, how we research and use the research that we create. And that working group has created generative AI standards to guide the staff in using these tools, and is now providing training on ethics, governance, and other aspects of it. Earlier this year, in 2024, the City Council passed a resolution to form an AI advisory committee that's bigger than just inside the city. It's an AI advisory committee to help us develop guidelines so that we do no harm, and we have security, and we create a workforce plan. This external AI advisory committee includes members from industry, universities, and community partners to help keep us informed and on the AI ecosystem and teach us as we go along. So I'll kind of end where I started. It's vitally important as we develop this and we present these new, exciting, weird ideas when it comes to all this, that we keep security, safety, and ethics at the forefront. Again, I'm going to say it every chance I get. Do no harm, look for hidden vulnerabilities, and make sure we're not creating unintended consequences. So our future plans include developing and piloting chatbots and advanced routing models for service tickets, proactively identifying and piloting new use cases to further enhance service delivery, expanding and diversifying our training programs to keep pace with evolving AI technologies, and most of all, we plan to learn and grow. This space is evolving, as you know, very rapidly, and we intend to move with it in a very proactive but also safe, secure, and thoughtful manner. So thank you all very much for having me here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
You want to do some?
We've got time for a few questions. I purposely tried to create some. How are you, man? Got one over here. Will you hand me that water?
Can y'all hear me? Okay.
Great talk, Mayor. So what do you think about, the whole concept of AI? Think about your grandchildren's generation. What comes to mind when you're thinking about your grandchildren, and under your three guidelines there, what do you foresee for your grandkids?
Well, I wish I could foresee everything for my grandkids in that regard. But here's when I'm wearing my mayor hat, which I tend to wear all the time. I think of how it applies in the services that they're going to want and need. And one of the first things I think of is transportation. And I hadn't thought about it in that way until you asked that question. But the very first thing I think of is, what will transportation look like for Effie and Birdie? Effie will be 7 in November, and Birdie is 3. What will it look like 20 years from now when Birdie is essentially the age I was when I got to Austin, Texas? And how will AI and the data inputs that we have about how traffic moves and the different things that we're dealing with, how do we do a better job of providing service to make that occur? Second thing I think of is, how will AI impact their use of energy? Of course, in Texas, we have faced grid issues, and one of the big issues in Austin, of course, is how we're working on our generation plan. Austin owns its own electric utility, and we're trying to do that also as we address issues related to climate. And one of the big issues, of course, is we've just passed zoning changes this year to make it easier for electric vehicles to get charged. Now, stick with me. I'm getting to where I think AI plays out in this. One of the big fears is what happens if we are very successful in that regard and everybody wants to charge their car at the same time, at 6 o'clock at night on a hot day, and we shut down the grid in the name of doing the right thing. Think about when I think about how AI can help us for Birdie's future and Effie's future, it is in something like that where we know, even I know where I think we're headed, but how do we manage those sorts of things? In addition, as we try to get more and more people to put solar panels on their houses and the ability to have distributed energy, and have AI help us manage those kinds of things. Now, I've just given 2 examples of services, and maybe what I did is defaulted to 2 of the most complicated problems that our local government faces and think, please, AI, help me figure this out. But that's how I look at that. So I'm hopeful that what AI does is helps us manage some of the more complex issues we've got that are a problem for us today, but 20 years from now, they won't even think about it. So I need to think more about that too. Other questions? Yes, sir.
So, hi, that was amazing. Very nice to meet you. My name is Jonathan. Recently at this summit so far, I've heard a lot about this brain drain in the utility space, and that a lot of people are retiring and a lot of the experience is kind of going out. As new people are coming to Austin, there's a lot more in the AI space, a lot of bright minds coming from UT. What from the mayor's office or from your perspective might be being applied or done to incentivize more of the young minds, the bright minds, to come into the space, also from an AI perspective?
Well, I'm going to answer that more generally than AI, and we're recruiting you for AI, because I will tell you that one of the things that keeps me awake at night is the general concept of how we keep young people. Those transitions I talked about at the first of the speech. Well, how is it that we keep that transition? We stay at the forefront of that transition the way we have up until now. And what keeps me up at night is that I've always said that one of Austin's gifts, one of Austin's hidden secrets is that we have a fountain of youth. And that fountain of youth is that we have Houston Tillotson, we have Concordia, we have St. Ed's, we have ACC, and as I've said multiple times today, that little public university known as the University of Texas at Austin. And when I talk about that as a fountain of youth, what I mean by that is every year, thousands of new people show up in my city. And they bring the things I was talking about. They bring new thought. They bring new ideas. They bring new music. They bring new culture. They bring greater diversity. And what has happened for decades is they get here, and after about 3 months, they say, oh, I never want to leave. I'm staying in Austin. And that's our fountain of youth. And a key part of Austin being Austin has been that we've accepted that, and that has led to change all along the way, and it's led to people staying in Austin. When I got to Austin in 1981, at 23 years old, same thing happened. I was just out of school, and we moved here for 1 year. I had a 1-year job, and Liz and I thought we'd go back up to the North Texas area, which is where our families were, and we thought that's where I'd practice law. And after about 3 months, we said, well, we never want to leave this. But you made a lesser salary at the time because there wasn't some of the jobs. And I was going to bars on Friday and Saturday night down here on 6th Street watching bands play, and the dude playing the bass guitar in whatever band I was listening to probably had an engineering degree from the University of Texas at Austin, but didn't have a job doing engineering. Well, now we have those jobs. And we can talk about all those different jobs. But we're not going to be able to keep that if we're not an affordable city. We have to be an affordable city. Otherwise, we're going to create a huge generation gap, and my generation will be the first generation that creates generational inequity. We can't have my generation say, well, we got ours, man. Isn't Austin booming? Isn't this a wonderful thing? We got ours, now you get yours, sucker. Because what will happen is we won't be able to attract for AI. We won't be able to attract for, look, with the CHIPS Act, Austin, Texas ought to become the center of the universe when it comes to chips and advanced manufacturing and semiconductors. Got to. But we got to be affordable. So what you have seen me do in the last 21 months is put affordability first and change. We had a 1980s era land development code. Well, we've made enormous changes in that. We changed our permitting process so that the city doesn't get in the way of building more housing and being able to do that. We've also, in order to be a complete community, is we started looking at workforce different. And I could go into all the detail, but a key part of that is going to be not so much how many jobs did we create, because we're going to win that every year. It's how many people in Austin did we get into those jobs. And that will include people that come here and then never want to leave, but we got to make sure we're getting them in the jobs as opposed to just transplants. So as you can tell, you kind of got me worked up. So, but good question. Hey. Yeah. Well, a great question, and I'll go back to what I was saying in the speech. There has to be governance, and not only does there have to be governance, but there has to be so creating the internal advisory group to help us on that, where they are tasked with putting us in that position. But importantly, and while I made the comments I made about whether or not we need to have an innovation office, and it needs to be budgeted. Of course, you obviously think it should. A key part of that is to also recognize that we're not going to know all the answers. Folks like the people in this room are going to have better answers, and that's why the council, why we created an advisory committee. So then the question becomes, is implementation. And so often, as you know, government will tend to say, okay, we've got this internal group, good on you all for meeting once every 6 months or whenever, and we've got this advisory group, and we'll have you meet a couple of times, then the mayor will show up and give you a certificate for your service, and we're done. We got to implement it, and we got to push to make sure that it gets implemented. But I think that's where we start, and we're seeing good results. We just need to stay on top of it. Why don't I do one more question?
Go ahead, yeah. Thank you very much. This is really helpful. So, we're a startup. We've been around for 4 months, right? Very new. We are in the software space, not the energy space. And I want to circle back on something you talked about that I think is real important, is the energy consumption of AI. I mean, you see Microsoft just bought 3 Mile Island, do a power plant specific for AI. Elon Musk has relocated here, 2 of his headquarters and his prominence in OpenAI, right? Energy consumption is going to be huge. We're not in that space. We're in the software space and how to reduce the compute power necessary to achieve the same goals. For somebody like us, and I think you hit on some of this, if you can expand maybe a little bit more, for somebody like us, it's so new in this space as a startup. What kind of resources or opportunities do we have with somebody like the city of Austin or even at the state level to be able to help and maybe make a difference or bring some of the knowledge that we have as a startup to that space?
Well, not enough is the answer. Not enough opportunity for that, and it's really primarily through what I've talked about. That being said, just hearing your question, and if the mayor stands up, gets a question like that, and the answer is not enough, then I probably ought to go back and figure out how we create more opportunity. Yeah, send me an email. That's not a bad idea. But what I ought to do is we need to be thinking about how we create more opportunity, and not we just this year created the outside working group, and it's work. That's good, but how we get to folks that are 4 months into startup that might have good ideas, if nothing else, from starting up and, oh, look at that, and that didn't work, or that sort of thing. There needs to be more opportunity, and I need to think more about that. Let me put it back on you. What would the opportunity look like if you could wave a magic wand?
Some of the stuff you talked about is really useful. Working groups. Yeah. So the opportunity to expand our knowledge into some of the main players and the key people that are really thinking about this, it takes a lot of effort to try to discover and make those connections.
Yeah.
Right? So being able to accelerate opportunities like
so I don't mean to create this right now, but what that says to me is I need to go back to our external working group and ask them what they're doing in terms of community outreach and how because I don't know the answer, and ask them what they're doing to reach out and get more knowledge from others that may not be on there, so that they can make better decisions and provide better advice. And I'll do that. So that's a good question, even though it's rare that you hear me say I don't know. But in fact, that'll be the last time you ever hear me say that. But let me go back and work on that. We'll do one more, and then am I behind schedule? All right. I don't mean to throw you off. Yes, sir. Okay.
About 15 years ago, the last technology council was in a meeting like this, in Vietnam, and the idea came up that when a large company in Atlanta was procurement turned down a small company buying sell something, they don't know why.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, thank you. It was in Atlanta about 15 years ago when you'd go through the procurement process and there was a turn down, you would tell them why so that they would be able to improve on it and come up with something. I like that quite a little bit. So thank you all very much for what you do. Appreciate you being in Austin. My pleasure. Thank you. Hey, big man. It's great to see you. Yeah.